This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by NG.DEV.TEAM. It's a game few thought they would get to play due to various factors that led to a limited physical-only release. Of those few, some will have gotten a standard version with a case typical of what is expected of any other Switch game. A flashy cover, information about the game on the back, interior art, and of course the game card. There's even a manual included, which is still a rarity in today's mostly digital age. Others will have gone a little further with the limited edition, featuring a beefier collector's box, a full jewel-case CD soundtrack, a set of art cards, and a sticker set full of space pilots in skimpy flight suits. You gotta have a skimpy flight suit. It's all very high-quality stuff, but not everyone needs the shelf presence this release provides. The game is the most important part, and now anyone can finally get it for themselves on the Nintendo eShop. And that's where we come in. In this episode of Bullet Heaven, we're taking a look at Razion EX for the Nintendo Switch. The original Razion was a horizontal scrolling shooting game developed and published by NG.DEV.TEAM for release on the Neo Geo MBS and AES in 2014 and 2015 respectively. It was later tweaked and released to the Nintendo Switch in June of 2021 as Razion EX, with a host of upgrades including refined controls, a reduced difficulty, reworked stages, bullet cancelling, and added quality of life improvements and effects. Generally speaking, Razion is a somewhat straightforward game with a couple of neat hooks to its gameplay, but it has also built up quite a bit of mystique thanks to its very limited initial release. So what's it all about? Let's take a closer look. Razion is all about a flashy presentation and difficult gameplay, but it's generally an approachable, basic shooting game as well, especially from a control standpoint. Heart 8 control and 3 core buttons are employed in its control scheme. By default, the analog stick and D-pad will get the player around the screen at a satisfying rate. No true analog here, which is par for the course in any Neo Geo shooting game. The player can fire their main shots with the Y or X buttons, with X dedicated to rapid fire while Y can be held to enter a focus mode. While in focus, the player's movement will be reduced just like a cave shooter, and the player's hitbox will appear. The L and ZL buttons can also be used in exactly the same manner, respectively. The player also has access to a beam, which launches a powerful attack with a wide area of effect straight ahead of the player's ship. This helpful attack does a good amount of damage to anything it hits, and it will clear any bullets in its path. Not only does its size make it ideal for attacking lines of foes in tight spaces, it can also be shot through terrain, which makes it useful for taking out foes and bullets behind walls, which happens frequently. The beam can also freeze score cubes left behind by defeated enemies, allowing more time for them to be picked up before they disappear. Freezing cubes is very useful for scoring, which we'll take a look at shortly, but it also has other applications. Of course, there is a trade-off. Using the beam will enter the player into a cooldown phase in which their overall shot power is reduced. A gauge at the bottom of the screen will fill up over time, but it will fill slower if focus fire is being used. Collecting cubes left behind by defeated enemies will also fill the gauge faster, with frozen cubes doing a much better job of it. The short of the long of it is, there's a fair amount of strategy involved in using the beam to maximize not only score, but also efficiency for stage progress and attack power recovery. Razion EX is played over the course of 6 densely packed stages. There's going to be a lot going on at all times, with a decent amount of fire being lobbed all over the place. Learning each stage's layout and enemy placement is going to be important in getting that coveted 1 credit clear. Thankfully, there's a couple of ways that players can get the lay of the land, starting with its 3 difficulty levels. A novice, normal, and maniac difficulty, each primarily denoted with a blue, green, and red ship respectively, give players of all skill types a fighting chance at seeing the end of the game. This particular version of Razion also sports unlockable credits, which are added as the player gets more playtime under their belts. Starting with just 2, a maximum of 10 can be unlocked. Additionally, a training mode both for any cleared stage and any encountered boss is accessible as the conditions required for unlocking each is achieved. Regardless of the difficulty in which the stage or boss is unlocked, they will be available for training in any difficulty selected. And this is all well and good, but we ran into one particularly nasty issue with Razion EX in general, and it's a doozy. We had a really hard time with bullet and threat visibility. Enemy bullets do not have visual priority over some elements in the game, most notably player shots. Especially given the slight spread of the player's main weapons, and particularly when using focus fire to get in between tight spaces, this will absolutely cause issues. Other instances, like these dark blue missiles against a dark purple background surrounded by bright pink shots that they fire, caused us a lot of confusion at first. We had no idea why we were dying until we finally noticed them. Not ideal. Stage 5 also features a very dark theme in which a number of asteroids will kill the player if they are collided with. Once again, they blend in very well, especially when shots and explosions start filling the screen, making for an uncomfortable, frustrating time. In general, these visibility issues are the only major stumbling block to an otherwise competent shooting game. Sure, there are times when things get a little frustrating, like these enemies barfing ricochet bullets all over the place, but that's stuff that can be dealt with in training with a bit of memorization and tactical beam deployment. The hidden shots though, that's no bueno. However, acclimating to these issues can lead to a pretty decent time when all is said and done, especially when exploring the scoring system at play here. Enemy destruction alone won't get the player too far when it comes to scoring in Razion EX, though chaining enemy kills will build a counter that boosts the value of each kill respective to the amount that have been taken out in a row. When it comes to scoring big in Razion EX, cubes are the name of the game. Any defeated enemy will leave cubes behind, which are drawn in and collected by the player's ship as it approaches them. However, they can also be grown before pickup as more enemies are dealt with and as the kill chain is driven higher. The more there are, the higher the score will be. But over time, these cubes will eventually disappear. If even one breaks, all of them break and their points are lost. Using the beam to refreeze these cubes will allow players to extend the time they can be collected. These cubes will be added to a multiplier that is found in the top left-hand corner of the screen, but will reduce the player's enemy kill chain as they are collected. However, when the chain counter reaches a threshold to multiply the cubes, the player's chain value will be maintained much better than under normal conditions, and grown cubes can be collected for longer. When it reverts to yellow again, the chain loss will occur as normal and cubes will revert to their normal values. Players should be careful though. If cubes do time out, they'll also heavily reduce the chain counter. It can be tricky maximizing both values, but with practice, strategy, and patience, it's more than possible. Scoring high gives way to extends, which in turn allows players to get further in a single credit. So learning when to keep cubes on screen while concentrating on getting the chain counter up is critical in getting these extra lives faster. Unfortunately, there are no online leaderboards for Razion EX, meaning that its local leaderboards are all players have to show off their exploits. Thankfully, the Switch has a screen capture button, so it's easy enough to snap a picture of any high scores achieved. Unfortunately though, its lack of online leaderboards may hurt the long-term appeal of this game. Still, the scoring system is fun, and that counts for a lot. If nothing else, Razion EX is a game whose identity depends heavily on its presentation. Flashy visuals and high-quality sound can elevate even the most mediocre shooter to prominence, if done correctly, and Razion EX does a lot right. Visually, Razion EX mostly succeeds with a gigantic amount of high frame rate pre-rendered elements and some additional 32-bit effects new to the Switch release. The general design here isn't too shabby, and the pilot art is pretty spicy. I mean, obviously, right? Starfighters are unpilotable without a space thong, after all. Meanwhile, the enemies and bosses are as one might expect of a game whose design is produced and directed by the head of HuCast. Once again, there's a good amount of smooth animation, though much of it is pretty stiff and... Wait, hold up. Is that an F-22? What's that doing there? Anyway, we think things could have been taken much further. Just as we saw with Fast Striker on PlayStation 4 in episode 227, Razion's upscaled 240p resolution is plenty serviceable, sure, but it could have benefited greatly with high-resolution re-renders. True 16:9 could have been a great modernization as well, rather than the expanded but still pillar box visual area found here. Redux on Steam was a great example of how this could have been done. That's not to say that things look terrible, quite the opposite actually. Some of the backgrounds look fantastic, if a bit static, and there's a good amount of parallax added to the mix both in the background and the foreground, though some foreground elements can also obscure bullet visibility. We will say though that the pre-renders here are absolutely better suited for a CRT rather than a modern display, further demonstrating the advantage high-resolution re-renders would have. And of course, the shot priority is a real concern when things get particularly explodey on screen, though a bit of memorization and acclimation can help with this. The audio has a couple of shortcomings as well, not so much the OST, as Andre Newman once again provides a top-notch soundtrack to accompany the action on screen, but there is a lot of overlap when it comes down to the sound effects being used here. Most, if not all of them, have been repurposed from other games that both NG.DEV and HuCast have made in the past, particularly Redux. They work, but Razion could have benefited from updated or new sounds. Which brings us to the general flow of the game. Razion EX in general really does feel like another take on the Dux series, albeit more in line with veteran mode in Redux rather than 1.0, 1.1, or 1.5. The first two stages are extremely similar to Dark Matters, and all kinds of enemies are very closely designed to those found in Redux. Even the R-Series style ships, though lacking a force alike, are once again shockingly similar to the veteran mode ship in Dark Matters. When asked about these similarities, producer Tim Helwig stated that while the visuals were handled and directed by Renee, the game itself was put together as a new title that had nothing to do with Redux at all. It's definitely uncanny, but it seems it's merely a coincidence. Beyond the obvious audio-visual factors, a clean UI and simple, easy-to-navigate menus, control rebinding, audio options, scan lines, and a selection of wallpapers round out Razion EX's presentation. So, how does Razion EX stack up? Let's take a look. Razion EX feels all around pretty good when it comes to its controls. Generally speaking, Razion EX has a decent amount of challenge, but sometimes for the wrong reasons. Hidden and obscured bullets are no bueno. At 6 moderately long stages available in 3 difficulties, there's plenty to play and practice in Razion EX, but a lack of online leaderboards hurts its overall longevity. Generally speaking, Razion EX's visuals are good, but they're better suited to a CRT. This release definitely could have used some high-res re-renders. The awesome soundtrack by Andre Newman does the trick, but like all the sound effects are from other games, giving it a little less personality of its own. Razion EX is a game with very similar features to a great number of others, and it feels more like an extension of Dux than a completely new title, though this has been confirmed not to be the case. The score hooks are pretty satisfying though. From NG.DEV, Razion EX sports a moderate price tag with a good value. On eShop, its lower price is even better. But from scalpers, the price hikes up to very high territory, especially for special editions, with a decidedly bad value for the money. More are on the way, so moral of the story, don't buy from boutique scalpers. It's clear that there's a lot of hype surrounding this game, but having played it, we can safely say that its perceived value is severely overinflated at auction for no other reason than it was originally a limited release with no other way to play it. It's definitely good. But did I have fun with it? Well, yeah, it has its issues, and its lack of a competitive leaderboard feature limits its overall staying power, but it still makes for quite the decent time on a rainy day. Razion EX has some seriously stiff competition on the Nintendo Switch this year, but it's still a game that's definitely worth playing. Though it's currently sold out physically, NG.DEV is preparing another round of copies for early 2022, with more reprints planned as long as there's demand, so, don't give in to the scalpers. For everyone else, Razion EX is now finally available on the Nintendo eShop. Links to it all below. Scalpers, am I right? They've made things so difficult with releases such as this, and the recent scandals in the realm of retro gaming haven't helped a bit. Hopefully things can return to a more manageable norm. But it's good to know that at the very least there will come a time when everyone should be able to get their own copies of Razion EX.